Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week in hospitality marketing live show number 439. Goodness, it's Happy New Year. 2024, beginning of the year, new budgets, new visions, possibly new people, different roles, promotions, bonus schedule, winter time, spring break, everything's in front of us. It's always fun, the transition from year to year, because as I just mentioned, rattling off a few of those things, there's transitions of a lot of things. Obviously, not everybody has a fiscal budget that changes annually. Some people have a different time zone to it, as their time zone, different time sequence as to when their budgets change. But I would say a very large proportion of the world works on the idea that come January 1st, there's a new budget. We obviously spent a lot of time last year during budget season, August, September, and October, talking about all the crazy zany things related to budgets. But today I want to talk about, since we're at the beginning of the year, what from how we look back at last year. As all of you that follow the show regularly, which by the way, thank you so very much for watching us on our TV channel, for watching us on our simulcast on all the different social platforms, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, well, X, sorry. Twitch, and then of course, like I said, TV channel on Roku, Google, Amazon, Apple, and the rebroadcast of the audio version of the show, plus our podcast on our radio station, globally, 209 countries, everywhere for everything. We didn't do a year in transition show. We didn't do a look back. This is what we went from and so forth. But think back a year, since a lot of our strategies are related to year over year calculations. Where we were last year, we had just been exposed to ChatGPT. That came out in November of 22, and we were beginning to see the ripple effects of people's curiosities and interests and so forth. That ran through the whole year. We saw a flurry of programs that were adding what they called AI into their systems. We had a flurry of people that were trying to use AI as a solution process for things. But I'm safe in saying that most of us in the trenches of doing hospitality marketing, AI, other than being a useful augmentation tool to tools that we've already been using, which on our podcast we cover quite extensively every week, has been still regulated to a bit of a novelty. We play with it. We don't rely on it as much. I mean, again, caveat being some of us use it more than others, but we haven't really integrated it into a functional, consistently persistent, trusted tool for lots of reasons. One is AI doesn't always tell the truth. It wants to answer your question, even if it has to make up what it has to use to make your question get an answer. Things like that I find very, very profound in saying AI doesn't say, I don't know. AI doesn't do math. AI is a progressive language to generative AI. It is one word to the next. And it does a really remarkable job of aggregating massive amounts of data. It does a great job of interpreting that data based on relevancies and so forth, on and on. We've had those discussions on AI many, many times. AI has been a perennial topic this past year. But now, first show of 2024, I want to talk in terms of what our topic is today, and that is 2024, the year that makes your data make you money. Makes you money, plural. Let me type that out now because I didn't put a plural there. Wow, bad grammar already in the beginning of the year. It's going downhill from here. Anyways, I did make a cute little fun thing that I grabbed. I did want to wish everyone a happy New Year, folks. One more time around the sun. Please keep your hands and feet and various anatomical appendages inside the car at all times. Keep your seat backs and tray tables in a locked and upright position. So buckle up, strap in, and hold on. It is 2024. Now, I wanted to put that first in this, and I didn't. I forgot I had written that little ditty. Anyways, back to the task at hand. We have done a lot of discussions of data. The GA4 transition last year in July, they pushed transition where we thought it was a general fade out of Universal Analytics. It was more of a cliff that most people dropped off of. A lot of people are still sitting blind, deaf, and dumb when it comes to their data right now. And I think this month, maybe the month that most people realize that their year-over-year data is not going to be what they used to do, that there is no real correlation between how it was measured in UA and how it's now measured in GA4, that there is variances, and there's going to create some inconsistencies. It's going to change some of the reporting patterns. Some of it uses it as a scapegoat, saying, well, that change we couldn't do anything about, so our numbers being off isn't really a performance issue. It's a metrics issue. Sure, there will be places that do that. We're already seeing some agencies hiding behind that curtain of, hey, it's not us, it's them. Um, that happened a lot for us, but it changed the way we did data. And we've had, again, many, many shows about the difference in the data, that universal analytics was about pursuit of a singular process. You had to pre-identify it to begin to measure it from the point that you identified it or wanted to identify it. With universal analytics, everything is being measured. It's up to you to decide what you want to see in those measurements, which again, it truncated the data storage to being only 14 months. We talked about getting outside data storage so you keep that as an asset to yourself, on and on and on, using BigQuery. We've had those things. We've gone through that process. With that, let's talk a little bit about the stages of what we've done with data. The first thing that, from a progression point of last year, most importantly, is that we defined the data we needed to track. This is a fundamental first step for anything. It's easy to say, oh yeah, let's get everything. Not a lot of people know what to do with everything. And a lot of those people that say just gather everything is a lazy way of saying, I don't know what we want, so just get everything. It's not that easy when it comes to then what are you going to do with the data? Yes, GA4 makes it nice in your web world that you can track all data, but knowing what to do with it and defining the data that we truly want to track, not just the fact of gathering everything, okay, but the actual data sources, the data related to channels. What's the purpose of gathering those particular data? Let me give you some examples of this. In general, simplistic terms, your overall traffic engagement to your website is data that you would want to track. You want to know how many people came in. You want to know how many items they looked at, like I said, room types and so forth. You want to see where they are on your site to look at those things. You want to see what they were looking at when they eventually ended up buying something. And you also, more importantly, want to look at the people that looked at stuff and didn't buy. That's the predominant portion of your audience. We always talk about the conversion values of 2, 3, 4, 5%, which would be astronomically wonderful. What if that means that 95, 96, 97% of the people coming to your website don't end up purchasing in that time that you're tracking what they're doing? Those are the people I'm interested in. Why? Portions of those you weren't related to what they were looking for. Portions of those you didn't have what they were looking for. Portions of those where they found what they wanted, but they didn't want what they were having to buy it for, or restrictions on inventory, whatever. There's lots of reasons, but it's good to find those reasons. So defining the data that we need to track is the inaugural step. That happened a lot last year. Should have happened a lot last year. Then, now that you are defining the data you want to track, configuring and labeling the data. Meaning, okay, we're tracking all this stuff. We've identified what we find valuable in our tracking. How do we want to identify those things so that we use that data, or when we see that data, we understand what we're looking at? So, case being, if you use property codes to identify your properties in a group of properties you may be dealing with, does everyone understand that code represents that property? If you know what I mean, anybody that works with brand, they slowly, well, quickly, but then slowly over time, stop referring to their hotel as a Hampton or a Hilton or whatever. It's BZYQF or PDFOGA. It's the acronym, not the acronym, the reduction code that the brand assigns to the property based on its brand and relative location. So that when you're looking at multiple charts of data, to abbreviate full names, usually just the property code gets inserted in so that you understand which property. If you don't know what those codes are, it takes you a minute to reconnoiter as to, oh, I'm looking at the Hampton here, or I'm looking at the Hilton Garden there, or I'm looking at Holiday Inn here, or whatever. That's what I'm talking about, is simple things like that, making sure that as you gather the data from the sources and the channels that you've decided to be important, which there are a lot of, that you consistently identify the data in protocols that are identifiable. This also may mean at times that because there's different names for, say, room types, that you need to identify that even though this property calls it the Deluxe Ocean View Vista King Suite, it's a king room. compared to property number two, which might have a citywide, low floor, Vista King studio, still King room, unless there's another designation that makes them similar by square footage or whatever. But you identify them in similarities so that when you're looking at inventory as to their production, their contacts, their value proposition to what you would eventually use it for, you are equating it to relative terms in the same way. This isn't diluting their individuality. This is helping you aggregate data in a way that understands it from trends and pace, which we'll get to. The other is, once you've done these protocols of configuring and labeling the data, standard configurations, protocols as to what you call it. And this goes into your UTM structures as to how do you identify your campaigns, your markets, your programs, what you identify your campaign stuff for, so that as it comes up in your reporting, you know that that was an email campaign to this type of audience in this market with this promotion for this purpose. That kind of identification process is important to be able to identify successes of efforts in campaigning. So you standardize the protocol of how everyone should label what they do so that everybody understands what they're looking at, up the chain and down the chain. Okay, the next stage of this process is authenticating the data's accuracy. What I mean by this is you can measure something, but is the measurement of is what you're measuring in the terms or in the processes of what you need it for. It's think of it this way. There are several processes associated with data collection, in the sense that you have where the people engaged with. Maybe it's a website, maybe it's it could be any variety of things as to where it comes from, campaigns and so forth. The second is the collection of that data on a platform that you can look at it. And the third might be the point of truth data, like a PMS source that aggregates all of it. So, for instance, you look at websites, and we know that there's a lot of DuckDuckGos and ad blockers, and on iOS 17s have blocked a lot of cookie capabilities, on and on and on, so forth and so on. So you would assume a certain percentage of your web traffic is non-identifiable. You don't know what they did when they contacted you. They were blocking what it is that kept you the ability to track. They may have declined your permissions for cookies or information gathering or what have you. All of that may have happened. And you think that maybe out of the 100% of people that you're engaged with, maybe you got 50%. Well, the best way to check that is to go to a source farther down the road that's more of a aggregation or everything, like a PMS source that says, okay, all of our bookings are in this system, because that's how we track who's staying in a room. Now, from that, we know from the codes and the sourcing of how they booked where they came from. So you take that data and you compare it to your actual data for your website, and you draw how much of the business is totally representative of the business that the website said it did versus what the PMS said the website did. Ironically enough, those are much higher numbers than we had planned for last year for lots of people. And we noticed that there is still a very large, very statistically relevant and more probable confidence factor high, that these numbers are almost close to what all of the data is as it represents in the PMS. That authenticating process to know that as we look at the data we're collecting, say from our web engagements and so forth, we now have a high confidence that we're seeing 80, 90 plus percent of all the traffic that is reflected upon, which is very cool to know that you can go from where did it come from, how are we measuring it, and what numbers we're getting from that, and comparison to the entire inventory that we know it's being driven to. So authenticating the data's accuracy as a stage of making sure that you understand to what context, when you're looking at these numbers, that they represent the entirety of your data that you need to be looking at, and how valuable or how credible it is to make decisions from. The next kind of stages to the process is storing the data. The data should always be listed in your mind and your company's mind as an asset. The data that you get from ad campaigns, the engagements and successes of the ad campaigns, the data you get from CRM engagements, the data that you get from your PMSs, which you easily think, well, of course that's our data. Brands don't think so. Brand says it's theirs. But if you're a non-branded property, all of that data shouldn't be anybody else's but yours. And I mean that in a very clear way, that so many companies allow their agencies to put their ad campaigns for their properties, their businesses, on the ad manager, business manager of the agency. That's terrible. It's absolutely terrible because should you no longer work with that agency, you don't get that data. Oh, they may say, well, we'll give you what you have. Sure. They may flatten it and just send you a report of, well, these were the numbers of this, but it's not usable data. It's not interpretable data. It's not something that exists that you can make audiences from or use campaigns to generate. It gets lost when you break that relationship with the agency simply because you allowed them to build it under their ad manager. The other is analytics. And this is it's very sad. I see so many companies that allow their agency, because of whether out of ignorance or just laziness, combination of both, whatever, their agency creates the analytics account for the client's businesses on their account. Now, sure, they can give administrative access and so forth, but they own the account, which means at any time, should they ever want to, they can shut off that account. And also, forever and ever more, the hotel or resort or ownership group will never have full control over that asset. They have access to it, perhaps, but they don't have control over it. And that is wrong. You need to always be in the driver's seat of your data. You allow access to others to your data as you need them, so that when you choose to not to do business with them anymore, you disconnect their access to your data, but your data remains intact. If anything you can make as a 2024 resolution is to make that happen if you don't already have it. You change the data where you say, well, Loren, if they already have it, then all that data they have is lost. You're right. Lost in the sense that you don't control it, but change the accounts over to yours. Yes, it zeroes you out, but you know what? We're at the beginning of the year. This is a good time of any to change over how you handle your data. Have the ad accounts moved over to you. Have the analytics created for you that it's yours. Get ownership of your own data. Very critical for that. So going to the storing of the data, which is what the start of this conversation, you have to know that in GA4 and so forth, under the free versions, like, hey, use our product, which Google's brilliant about doing, after 14 months, data will, I say it disappears. It doesn't truly disappear. Aspects of it disappear. Some reporting capabilities disappear. Some portions of data disappear. It doesn't completely disappear, but it's not as usable as the 14 months of data that it keeps. It's very good and also very affordable to open up an account with Google's BigQuery, which is their databasing platform. It's pennies on the dollar when it comes to storage. Yes, it'll begin to add up over time, and yes, it'll begin to cost more over time, but it's still your data. What makes that very nice is by storing it, you're pre-proofing, future-proofing what your data is, because you going to the old adage of, gather everything, back to stage one, defining data, what we need to track, gather everything. Since GA4 does gather everything, you don't know what you don't know as to what you might use the data for in the future. You might find in the future tense that there's a huge correlation between action X and result Y. And you didn't know that when you first, 12 months ago, but now that you do, you want to look back 12 months. Well, having your data stored year over year makes you allowed to go past 14 months. So you can look at the annualization of your data and go back as far as you want, because that's the cool part about GA4 data. It's collecting it. So it's ready for you to ask a question, and it can go back to all that data and give you an answer, compared to, okay, from this point forward that you asked the question, I'll start looking for an answer. That's the difference between old Universal Analytics and GA4 is now you can go back and retroactively ask questions that you didn't plan for, and you thought of the question now, and you go back and look at the data as it relates to your question. Universal Analytics only starts from that point forward to start looking for an answer to your question. So that's huge in storing your data set. Now, you'll hear buzzwords like data lakes and all this other stuff, and there are platforms and availabilities of putting data too. I would say if you don't know what they are, don't think that you should just do it and figure it out later. Go for the easy stuff, BigQuery, things like that. Set up an account, connect it to your ad account. It's click, 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 very easy interface. Then should you engage with an agency that wants to do more, or you've decided to do more with it and you're looking for an agency to do that with, or you internalize something, which, by the way, I have to get back to last week's conversation. I got some feedback from that show, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Then you have a place for them to start from. Like, here's all the data. We didn't do much with it other than what you see, but we have it all. So you create more things that we can do with it. So storing the data is critical to the stage. Now, the next after that, and I'm actually just retroactively going backwards in time to bring you up to where we are right now. We're still going through the stages you should have already been going through. Seriously. This is creating real-time dynamic dashboards to represent your data. Now, dashboards are not reports. Reports are static. Reports are a slice of time. Here's the information. Dynamic dashboards are always consistently, persistently being updated with the data. There is lag time with Google, usually around 72 hours, where they get to clean up and clear any issues that they find of duplicities of things and so forth, miscellaneous things that their algorithm sorts out. But for the most part, it's about close to what it is, even including the 72 hours, and it's rock solid 72 hours prior and back. The dashboards allow you the fluidity of changing your tables as to looking at this versus this, looking at this property for only these things, looking at this property in comparison to that property, looking at this channel versus the results of these efforts. It allows you that capability. Obviously, one of the easiest ones and free ones to use is what Google provides because it connects to their data so easy, and that's Looker Studio. Yes, you have analytics in GA4. Yes, you can go over and get their little cute engagements. It's minor, it's helpful, it's generic. Unless it's configured properly, it's not helpful. Even if it's configured properly, it's a tip of an iceberg of data. Building your own dashboards in Looker Studio, okay, where you add dimensions that you want into reporting and so forth, means you have the flexibility to customize what you want to do for the people that need to know the data. The dashboards are helpful and useful. But dashboards are just that. They're giving you the data in charts and graphs and whatever way you want to look at it, for you to interpret what that data is supposed to be telling you. You have to look at, you have to know the relevance of a conversion percentage, past and present, and the delta. And you have to mentally know whether that delta is a good delta or a bad delta. Is that previous number a number that we were proud of or ashamed of? And this number is we're proud of or ashamed of. The perspective of interpretation is really reliant upon the user of the dashboard. And it always has been. I mean, reports, Excel sheets back in the days. Here's our chart of everything, and everybody super smart would be looking at what they're looking for. I mean, think of the old star reports. I know I dogged them to death about this, but tab 4, man. Everybody every week got their star report. And the first thing they wanted to do was look at tab 4 on the RevPAR index. If you're a revenue manager, marketing, whatever, salesperson, because that was the kiss of the day. Either you were going to be lauded for successfully doing your job, or you're going to be chided for somehow falling short of what we were compared to the metric of what you wanted to do for RevPAR. And then you broke it down into whether you're strategizing on occupancy or ADR and comp sets and things like this. That kind of chart engagement is what dashboards relate to. Reports are more of aggregation of data and a perception of looking at the data. Reports really should be about taking something like the dashboards, creating correlations that are relevant to whatever task they're being generated for. And a report is generated from that saying, we went from here to here with the growth of such and such and a cost of such and such. That's a report. A dashboard is an ability to get the data that generates a report. So there, we have brought you up to where we should be starting 2024 with. So to recap on our stages that we should have gone through on our data, we should have defined the data we needed to track. We needed to configure and label the data that we were tracking. We need to authenticate the data's accuracy that we were already labeled and configured and defining. We need to store the data in a proper place that remains as our asset, okay? And then we need to create a dashboard that represents or has a way of displaying that data in a readable format. That should be where you started this year. Ta-da! Now, bringing back the full circle of why I threw up AI last year as a post-2023 review of dialogue that we've had and so forth. AI, people are desperately wanting to use AI for data. And it is usable for data. I'm not discouraging that process. I believe that's an inevitable direction we're going to go. But people are playing with a toy that they don't understand the fences on in a way that authenticates the usage of it beyond being novelty, which is why we're still at that point of novelty. It tells us something, but sometimes it's kind of Captain Obvious stuff. And let's take this in question and point. We've been working with AI and working with some very advanced, currently advanced tools related to using very long prompt sequences, which is the way of telling AI what you're wanting, um, to look at data that we're giving it access to ask questions about that data. Now, our goal was to create a long language engagement of being able to get a answer from what we asked. That was question one. And what we ended up getting was from these platforms. We had some playtime. December was fun. I think I mentioned in our show of about 4 shows back, 330, 434, 433, somewhere in there, that we're going to have play dates in December because it was a wonderful time to go over and play with some of these toys to see how good we can do whatever we're going to do with them. So we tried to be as smart as we could about creating these prompt sequences and data sheets and we'll create this data set from this data and this data set from that data set. And then we're going to ask the AI to compare these two data sets and give us some correlations or confidence and so forth. What it ended up doing was creating one thing that is helpful, but not what we were looking for. And that is it gave us the information as an answer, but we could have found the answer ourselves if we just looked at the charts. So the helpful part of this was if somebody doesn't want to look at charts or is at the tier of engagement that just needs to have an answer to a question, and I'll get to give you some of the idea of the answers we had to the questions we asked. It's helpful because they don't have to glean over a chart to see what they were looking for as an answer or looking for data that would give them their answer. The AI, if you ask that prompt, which if you look at Google Analytics, there is some insight questions you can ask and they'll give you direct answers. It's based on that same kind of relationship. So with the AI tools that we were using, it would give us a very specific answer to our very specific question, or it would give us a table to answer any complex question of comparative request. And it's great for those people because then they don't have to go dig through the charts and they don't have to ask one of their supporting team to go do this for them and give them an answer. They get to go over and have AI abbreviate that and think of it in terms of if you're going to get on a call with one of your properties and you need to know very quickly things like, what was your best performing channel for the previous month? What was the cost of that channel? And is it better than it was the year before? AI can do that. It'll give you an answer. Boom, 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 boom. It's like, okay, this is your cost. It's 10% lower than it was of the same month of 2022. Blah, 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 blah. It's very helpful like that. So from a tool functionality of not having to look at charts to get that, it's helpful. However, then this is the place where we were trying to get to. Is can it help us in the prediction models that we're wanting? I'm going to pause that thought for a minute because we're going to get back to that. Because now I want to talk about talk about the stages of what we should have been doing for data up to the point of starting 2024. We're at 2024. What are we talking about for next steps? So let's go through the next steps process the way I see them, and then we'll get back to the AI discussion of how that might influence them. So the next step for data is categorizing the level of reporting needs of the data. As the example I gave, somebody that doesn't need to grind into the charts to get the data they need for an answer is at a level they just need a clarity of what they need to know. They need more milestone benchmarks and notifications. They're usually C-level people, vice presidents, directors, because they have a larger footprint of things to be aware of, multiple properties, multiple departments, whatever. They need a more notification process. These are the people that need to be told your spend budget on the pace that you defined or the budget that you said was the cap is at pace to go above it by this date in this month. Maybe something to look at. That's a notification. That can get sent to a C-level or a VP that says, hey, your current ad spend for property X is at pace to exceed your monthly budgeted amount by X percentage, whatever. Now, if it's early in the month, it's a question to ask. It's a prompt for them to go and ask somebody that is more directly related to the data. So those people are just the notification process and so forth. Then you have people below them, I guess, not really below, but differently engaged with data that have the need to be more involved with the depths of data. They need different correlations. They don't need notifications and benchmarks and milestones. They need interpretive data. They need to look at things that are happening, channel productions, current cost levels, pace related to what they're doing, trend of what they're doing. We'll get more to those terms in just a little bit. They're a little bit more engaged with the data. They're not deeply engaged. They just need general data. They need to know that traffic is down to a website or conversions are down to a website or campaigns are not producing at a level that they expected based on the ad spend and the conversions that they calculated for. They need more numbers as to know which channels and why the performance, or where's the cost going through, which ad campaigns maybe not producing at the level that they were originally benchmarked for as a KPI and so forth. Those people have a more engaged relationship with the data, but they're still at a level of not grinding into the granular. Then you have the grinders, the people that are looking at the room type, the room rate of that type, of this month to last year, the pace of the sale, which channels sold that inventory type, what was the volume of engagement to that type, how many times was that property viewed in the selection process of the booking engine. Very granular data that is looking for very specific ways of understanding what's going on. Those people are a very small group of people, but they're very dedicated and they require volumes of data. They need a very dynamic way of correlating tables and dashboards to look at data as a result of what they're trying to look and understand for. But it's still a matter of coming up with a question and looking for an answer. So categorizing the level of reporting data is very important. Now, I gave you examples of how to use the data. Let me give you an example of the people that end up using it. Sadly, we can't educate the whole world. We have been doing digital marketing now for 24 to 25 years. 1999, there was general marketing. 2001, it was more about just exposure online, doing websites and so forth. 2001, we started getting online hotel chain distribution stuff, lodging.com and so forth, manually putting inventory in and stuff like that. And digital marketing represented maybe about 3% of total business at that time for hotels. It was a toy. By 2003, it was in the high teens. By 2005, it was in the high 20s, low 30s, and it just took off from there, obviously. So really, all on honesty, we've been looking at 25-ish years of doing this kind of stuff. And it's taken us that long to get most people familiar with basic terminology. What is PPC? What is a Google ad versus an email versus a Facebook ad? Some people are obviously beyond that, where they're like, what's a carousel ad in Facebook, or what is a click to call ad in Google? They might be in those levels of it. But most of the time, a very large proportion of our users, in what we can categorically put it is the lowest common denominator of knowledge. They are familiar with things. They're not always familiar with how those things are produced or what the means of those things are, but they understand the relative value of those things, or when they see it in a dashboard or a report, more importantly, what it's referring to. That lowest common denominator means that you have to always have as a resource to them the way they understand data. I have these many people coming to my website. I have these many people that bought from my website. That correlation creates a conversion value. Out of that, I had 4 channels added to the business of my website. Google, digital ads from Google, Facebook ads from Facebook, on and on and on. And percentage-wise, Google ads represents a certain percentage, Facebook represents a certain percentage. So if I were to take that and apply it to my total traffic and my total conversions and so forth, I'd get how much each of those channels produced from all of that. That fundamental understanding is the lowest common denominator people, and they need the terminology to understand the numbers that those things represent. They have to see visitors to the audience. They have to visitors to your website. They have to see how many conversions. They have to see how much came from Google. They have to see it in those terms. Data has, especially this past year, leapfrogged past all those metrics. It's kind of going back to those old enough to remember that a click counter on a website did not mean people bought. It just mean that somebody touched your website. It used to be a big thing to put click counters in the back. We have 10,000 people that have looked at our website, that kind of thing. It's kind of a relationship like that. It's not that the numbers aren't useful, but they're very simplistic. It's kind of like, hey, the sun's up in the sky. Yes, it is. It must be daytime. Okay, so the next group of people, and let's say I'll be optimistic and say 80% of the people are of the basic lowest common denominator of understanding of terminology and functionalities. I have compatriots in the industry that put that way higher than that, kind of like the 98 percentile as to, nope, about 98% of the people don't just at that level. But I'm going to be generous and say 80%. I'll then say 15% of the people are in this next category, which is the moderate insights group. These people are fluent in the basics that we already talked about. They're also fluent in the next level of engagement, which is the value propositions of breaking down each of those things more relevant to individual aspects of those numbers, plus understanding that there are other data sources that can be used. Simple examples would be geography, demography, behavioral. Now, if categorically they have fractionals all in those, geography is not just the regionality of a place, but actually perhaps down to the zip code. Demography goes into the categorizations of family configurations, genders, ages, and so forth. And then behavioral goes into interests of types of travel and things to do and so forth, in a very simplistic definition of those three types of categories. So those people, the moderate insight people, need a means of looking at data that's a little bit more robust than the very functional lowest common denominator data, where they might be needing to know not just the basics of traffic to the site, but how much of our stuff did they look at? Where did they look at it from? How was it that they went and looked at this stuff and eventually purchased, and which ones didn't? What did they look at and then leave? And by them leaving, is there a way for us to go back in front of them again? They have a much more thoughtful way of looking at the data, and inherently a greater need of more granular data, those moderate insight people. And those are more related to your department heads, your property management, property people, GMs and so forth, AGMs, director of ops and so forth. Obviously your corporate people at certain levels, not necessarily the rank and file people of handling the properties, but the people above, supervisors, directors and so forth, have this moderate insight need. Okay. And as I said, mathematically, generously, I'm giving that is another 15% of the total user base. So we're up to 95%. 80% lowest common denominator people. Those are your department heads of people that like, hey, that's what we're doing. Okay, I understand now. And moderate people, hey, I see this and I now see how that was contributed to in the pieces of it. Now we're going to talk about the people that are the smallest subset of all of them all, which is advanced analytics. These are the grinders. These are the ones that go in and are looking for causation relationships. Why is this inventory selling so much compared to this inventory? Why is this geography working its way with this behavioral group, this demographic range, and these ad campaign types on this channel at this cost at this time for these items? And look at the data that answers those questions. That takes time. That takes preconceived correlation of cause and effect, assumptions that can put you on a wrong path right out of the gate. If you're thinking people from Des Moines, Iowa are looking to come to St. Petersburg, Florida in December because it's cold in Iowa by nature, and they have kids that are just going to high school and it's Christmas break, and they're going to come down for 5 to 7 days because that's the worthwhile trip to make a flight for, because they're flying and they're flying, and you know that they have a rate resistance a certain price, and they have a total budget vacation budget being their second vacation of the year of X amount of dollars, then this is what we have to offer as rate and availability and target how much we need to put in specific geographic zones. If you make all these predications, you're looking for justification if they're right. Now, in the world of analytics, there's people that try to support their theses by looking for all the things that support it. And then there's people that are the ones I cherish the most. They're looking for all the reasons why they're thinking stupid thoughts that what they're thinking is not right. They're looking for everything that will show that what they're believing is wrong. Those people will find the truth faster than the people that are looking for justification of their pre-made concepts. Because pre-made concepts, they find just enough information to validate it, but they don't look far enough to dispute it. And when that happens, they come back to the table with wrong insights. So when it comes to advanced analytics and getting the proper data and so forth, you want to be open-minded about the data you're looking at. You're looking for causation. And this is where we begin to hit a wall of time. By the time an advanced analytics person looks at the data long enough with all the variables that can exist, and sometimes they're more than they can be planned for, the answer they get from it is not as usable as if it could be in their lap the same day they thought about looking at the data. That's where AI has its real value. We'll get back to that. So going from the next steps of 2024 data usage, categorizing the level of reporting needs of the data, you have your three categories of lowest common denominator person, moderate insights person, advanced analytics person. 80% common denominator, general information, 15% moderate insights, advanced information, granular, usable, interactive data for advanced analytics people. That has to be done this year because you need to understand where your sources of data are coming from and who's looking at it. Because if a person looking at data hands you a bad premise result, what I just gave as an example, they looked for affirmation of what they believed was happening and then found just enough of it to justify it to hand it to you. You're walking into a room to make a decision on data that is not correct. It's important that it is. So the next is, when it comes to next steps, defining what outside resources can and cannot do. This is where you need to really understand the realm of AI's usefulness and algorithms and machine learning. As I said before, AI doesn't do math. It will take the math you do and add it to what it answers, okay? But it's not going to do the math for you. I say that with an asterisk and a caveat because if you create a prompt that uses math formulas, it will, and you identify the items, the variables in the math formulas and the data that it's using, it can create the formula for you that you then can use. So in a way it can, but not in the way that I need it. So you have AI, which can give you some interpretation of data. And then you have the functionality of the data itself, which is more related to machine learning, which is the use of math, okay, in a progression, like take this data set, add them together, go to this data set, subtract that from that data set and make that used for this, whatever. That's machine learning. That's a progression of processes. An algorithm is a mathematical sequence of things that you do at that time. This is what I want you to do. Boom. A machine learning is, here's an algorithm that does this. Here's possibly a assimilation of this and the trend of this and put this together, put that, and then take this algorithm and apply it to this and give me a result here. That is machine learning. Putting the two together of AI and machine learning is really the value asset you need to consider this year of making the data make you money. Because now, going back to our idea of data and the advanced analytics people in particular, so they're looking to understand why we're getting the numbers we're getting. What's the causation? What's the effects and so forth? And I told you we get back to the terms of trend and pace. You really need to expand beyond just metrics benchmarks of RevPARs and occupancies and ADRs to understanding more KPIs, key performance indicators, benchmarks related to activities associated with the traffic to your site, the usage of a page, the functionality of a promotion code, the engagement of an ad campaign at thresholds that you consider to be relevant. Those are the key performance indicators that you're defining. Then you have the trend, the things we're talking about now. Those being used along with trends. Trends is a migration of from nowhere to anywhere to something somewhere. That's a trend. Pace is how fast it's getting there. How accelerant is it or how dormant is it going towards a direction? Okay. Pace isn't about in general. Pace is about specificities. What is trending and what is the pace? Why is this inventory selling this fast from here? That turns into this inventory selling KPI going in this quantity at this time. That's a trend. And why is it going this fast? Bookable rate. Okay, that's KPIs, trends, pace. Then over all of that is its relevancy of value. Is it really that big of a thing? And I say that because there's times where certain channels, I'll give you a great example of MetaSearch. MetaSearch has multiple channels that we're on, and we're exposed to all of the volumes of traffic on them. And we get great reports as to the volume of audience associated with that channel for our product. The platforms keep track of how many people are interested in what we have or where we have it, okay, that we didn't show up in front of because we didn't spend enough money for, which is their motivation to show that number to us because they want us to spend more money to make sure we get as much percentage of audience as possible. So in that, you can have it where we're being seen by thousands of people in some off-brand channel, Wago, as a MetaSearch channel. And then all of a sudden, boop, out of the blue, one massive booking happens from that platform, okay? And then a second one. So we get 2 in 1 month. Oh my gosh. So under the rules of KPI, key performance indicator, yes, it hit a threshold of, oh my gosh, we made this so much more than we anticipated. So it hit the KPI marker. Trend, wow, we've gotten 2 of them. It's going that this is proper. This channel is producing. Okay, great. Pace, it happened pretty quick within the same month. Boom, boom, boom. Value, in comparison to the hundreds of bookings we get off of Google, it has value. Is it worth doing something about? That's where you grind the data. Like, well, is there something we did well? Is there a demographic that we didn't touch? Is there a source that way goes in that we are beginning to get fertile results from? These are the questions that come up from that stuff. So it's not to be ignored, but value is the criteria of it. And more importantly, if you have a goal related to it, is the goal related to all of the meta search or particularly to Wago? It's like, okay, Waco, we had no goal because it wasn't producing anything. We had a goal of it doing something. But overall, it contributed to our meta search goal production. So good for us. So again, terms like KPIs, trends, pace, value, and goals have to be a part of your data definitions now. So we talked about the categorization of the data as we're using it. We talked about outlining the resources that can and can't do things between AI and machine learning, using algorithms as a particular, okay? And we talked about the particulars of how data can be helpful in understanding it. Let's define how for 2024 you can better use your data to make more money. As I said before, when we were playing with AI tools and creating prompt sequences and so forth for them, we really just reconstituted how we were seeing the data. It was telling us what we already could discover in our own charts, but in a way that was more concise, which, to my point earlier, answers some questions for some people that just need that brevity. Okay, it doesn't help the people that are looking for interpreting the data. Here's where we want to go, and here's my goal for 2024: is how do I get the data to tell me what I need to know? And that's an inversion. Okay, rather than having the data tell me what it knows, I want it to tell me what I need to know. Meaning, would it not be amazing that instead of getting a benchmark of your pace is higher for your spend than you had planned, that it is saying, hey, you might want to invest more money in Google ad campaign Z, okay, because its values of cost, or its value of conversion, or its value of volume of revenue, whatever your criteria in creating the metric that would make you this statement, okay, in the parameter of a prompt, is telling you you should probably contribute an next 20% more to the account because of its productivity. And if you did produce that 20% extra spend on it, you could see a growth of X dollars because of it. That ability to tell me that, rather than me asking where should I go into and see which I can produce more revenue from, to go in and see which campaigns I think I should spend more money because they're producing at a level that should, okay, is a huge change for us that I believe will happen in 2024. Just recently, I was on a call, and you've been on these calls if you're in this environment that we all work in, where you have campaigns that are doing exceptionally well. They're producing not only at the levels that you would hope them to, and the benchmarks are already been maintained but exceeded, but they're doing exceptionally well. So you're going to the client and you're saying, hey guys, we're really seeing some very high productivity on campaign X and Y, and we'd like to spend more money there. Hey, it was the kiss of death. First, you should always approach it with how much money you can make if we were to spend the money we're asking for at the pace that we're doing it in. Okay. Yes, it's not realistic because you have diminished value. And yes, you can go argue the point that it doesn't necessarily mean that it will continue to make the same return on increasing because you reach a diminishment of voice, expensive cost, diminished value return. It's a model. You all know it, or you should know it. Mathematical calculation is the diminished value of return. But for the most part, spending more money is good, and it would generate an incremental value of revenue that is at least definable as a benchmark. Okay. And you bring this up in the call and you go over and say, hey, if we were to spend, I think if we put another 1,000 or 1,500, you're not even really specific. It's kind of rounded. Okay. Well, okay. So it's producing well. So you think we should spend more? I'll have to ask my people and see whether we can afford the budget. If we have to take it from something else. By the time all that happens, the opportunity window is getting narrow, if not closed. You need to be much more convincing about why the money needs to be spent. And as I mentioned before, the fastest, best way is, hey, look, if you give me another $1,000 for campaign X, you're getting a 22-to-1 return on it right now. Even if we cut that in half at 10-to-1, that means for every buck that you're giving me, I'm giving you $10 back. How much money do you want to give me at that level? Oh, hey, slide it over, babe. Go take it. Well, it's not in our budget. Then you don't expect the revenue to hit its contribution goal. This is a chance to make hay. You have this. This is firing on all cylinders. This is making what we wanted to make and then some. The ultimate goal is gross revenue. So if you're saying I got to borrow from Peter to pay Paul, if there are lower performing campaigns, sure, do that. Sad that you have to, but do that. If you want to talk to any owner or any C-level person and defend the fact that you didn't give money to an agent that validated that they were giving you a 10-to-1, 20-to-1 return for the money you gave them, good luck getting out of that room without your butt intact, because they're going to wonder why you didn't. So having data that can substantiate that makes it even easier if the data is telling you that. Wonder if that same person that you're struggling to get the approval for to get the monies has access to something that says, hey, Loren, your ad campaign XY, okay, is producing at this level. And it looks like if we were to contribute $1,019.27 more at the current conversion of whatever percentage, at the value of transaction of whatever dollars, because those are all mathematical things can draw into this answer, because those are answers that it just pulls in. That doesn't do the math for you, does it? Then you would get a gross revenue increase of $30,000. Sign me up, hit the button. Yes, please do that. That is the good use of AI in combination to machine learning, because machine learning was needed to create the math. AI was needed to create the message. That's where this next step comes from using AI. You can do right now, the technology exists. We have the technology. Oh, $6 million man for old folks. To do both. The problem is creating the constructs to give the answers so that AI can take it to give you the answered result. That's the bridges we're building right now. But that's what 2024 means. And if you can have this, that means your data is now beginning to tell you what you need to do to make more revenue. That is a huge step from looking for ways that your data can tell you what you need to do. You have to hunt it. You have to go in and say, okay, here's these numbers and charts and correlations, and okay, my delta and conversions are going well for that. Why is it going well for that? And I have to play detective, like, okay, oh, that's the Google paid campaigns. Which one of the Google campaigns is doing that? Well, it's a combination of these two. Well, why are those two doing it well? What's the breakdown of where are they targeted from? Is the targeting the thing or the timeliness of the thing? And they have to do A/B and multivariate testing and everything else. But you're pursuing this down. That takes 2 or 3 days. And maybe the window of peak for that is a 5-day stretch. This is like the daily stock market thing. You're dialing and flipping levers and pulling stuff. Every ownership group would love that level of attention. AI and machine learning can provide that with fewer manpower and fewer resource commitments to it and less cost in the future, which is now. So there's that. We're going to have another show in a few weeks. I thought it'd be kind of fun of change from what and why to how in your data use. I came up with that as I'm putting this construct of our show together today, that we've gone through this like, what is the data telling me? Why is it doing it? Now we need to get into the third question, which is, how is this doing it? How is this ad campaign working? Or how is this traffic? Why? The why is, okay, answering why is these things happening? How do I begin to have control over it is the bigger question. We'll get back to that as to another show to that. Before I get to the announcement I want to give for next week, I want to talk a little bit about last week's show where I talked about internalization. The actual title of the show was Going Internal, the Real Challenges to Creating an Internal Digital Marketing Plan. I got some great feedback from you all. I got some great feedback from the club. If you're not familiar with Hospitality Marketing Club, it's a peer group, journeyman up. You're already in the business. You're already doing hospitality marketing, where you can join. It's closed door. Actually, you go to hospitalitymarketing.club, put your email in. I send you a quiz, which is a request if you understand hospitality marketing. You have to answer questions. You get 9 out of 10 right. Send you an invite. You join the club. And there we talk about this stuff. We go through these processes, not from a nobody knows thing, but from a what do you know and how well have you been doing it? And you get to ask peer level questions. We do live engagements. It's pretty cool. But anyways, so I got all this feedback from last week's because it is of a concern. I mean, not concern. It is of a mindset. It was the last show of 2023, and I know that going 2024, companies always try to reevaluate: are we doing the best thing with the best people, with the best agency, with the best people internally? Do we have people internally? Do we need to expand internally? We know what our mission goals are. We know what our growth is going to be. Is this the year that we fully internalize our own services for marketing? And I gave the contention that that's a bad choice because it's hard to get all of the people together at the price that you're willing to afford. And usually if you can't afford them, then you begin to parse them out to doing services for other places. So you third party them. It's hard to go over and justify them for the ramp up costs and so forth. And it ends up turning out that the people that are skilled at what they're doing, or you underservice yourself and you only hire one person that's good at the thing that got your interest in them, but then you burden them with things that they're not fully qualified to handle, which burns them out and you're left with nobody. I said that the best combination is to internalize somebody that is knowledgeable and capable, but for those reasons are the policeman of a third party that you trust and is productive. That way they're always riding and maintaining and correlating the goals of the company because they're on your team to the agency that is facilitating all the heavy lifting, and the agency is the one that aggregates all the resources necessary to succeed. I didn't say that from a selfish perspective. I say that from an actual cost logistics perspective. But one thing that came up in our dialogues that I wanted to add to that dialogue is culture. Because out of that whole process, we really didn't touch upon the part that destroys these efforts of internalization. And the best example I have is one that we discussed, not on the show, but with people that I was talking with on the club, is I look at you and, oh man, you're really great in social. You're great. I really like you. I think we get along well together, work together. Great. You're hired. I go over here and say, oh, you're really good with paid performance, paid campaigns, paid social. That's great. You and I get along great. I hired. I'm not working with you one-on-one anymore. Now we're working as a triad. Now those two people need to work together. And more importantly, they need to work together when I leave the room. And if I don't have the right culture, if I don't have that they get along well, that they communicate well, I can lay down all the rules I want. I can lay all the guidelines I want. But when I leave the room, they're going to go back to what they do. And culture is the killer of these people, because for you to have a few people, they have to be very talented, because you're not hiring as a specialist in each thing. You're hiring a unicorn of a person that has multiple talents. It's a unicorn. They can do everything relatively well, or some things really well. Okay. And when you get people like that, they're that kind of successful because they take self-initiative. Self-initiative, self-direction also sometimes translates into uni means of doing it, not omni, meaning that I do it, I think of it, this is my idea, I'm right about it, I. And that validation is what drives them. And when somebody else is also on that same path, you get a clash of, you're wrong, no, you're wrong, I'm right, no, I'm right. That culture needs to be clear, and it has to be defined for you to be successful, to internalize more than the one person that you might be bringing on board. They need to get along. By the very same nature, I've done this once, and it worked out really, really well, where the contingency of both people being hired for something in one department I was putting them together for was they had to want to hire each other to work with. They weren't hired yet. Now, obviously, you say, well, they're just going to say that so they get the job themselves. I made the deal was that they ride together, they die together. Yes, it was back when the bad boys were on. Anyway, the idea was, look, the success of each of you is tied to the other. You have to believe that you can do the things that not only you can do individually, but you can do collectively. If you can't, I know there'll be disagreements. You're not going to agree on everything. You're not going to condescend, even though you'll argue the points, but you'll do it in a way that's constructive for both of you. And it worked out phenomenally well. Can I say that it's successful all the time? No, but it worked that one time that I did do it. So the idea of culture within your quest for internalization is critically important. And I would say that even if you're going to hire one person to police whoever it is, third party you engage with, that they have to fit into the culture they're being brought into. They need to have enough teeth in what they're doing that they don't get told to shut up, sit down, and be quiet, because they can't succeed if other people that are ignorant of what they're doing have control over what they do. That's a critical element. They need to have the autonomy and or ability and or the authority, all of the above, to tell people, no, you sit down. This is my foray. This is what it is. I'm at risk for my job if my superior has a problem, not my peer. And sometimes it needs to be done that way. So that's my feedback from last week's show that kind of came out of conversations I had with others. Thank you for being able to do that. I want to wrap up today's show with something exceptionally cool. I told you last week, and I've told you in episodes before, but last week I told you that we're going to go into 2024 and we're going to open up the doors again, try to get co-hosts back on. People that we've politely declined, saying, oh, that's great. Yeah, we'll think about it in the future. And I never really did. I've decided that as much as I enjoy creating singular content and coming up with topic and going with, like we did today, granularly through the concept of, I also realize that a lot of audience people miss the dialogue. The pros, cons, rights, wrongs that go along with throwing up current engagement stuff and talking through them. The old show that we used to do. And so out of the inspiration of those people, we're getting the band back together, says the Blues Brothers. For next week's show, 440, on January 12th, we are going to have back Mr. Stuart Butler, Mr. Edward St. Ange, Mr. Tim Peter, Mr. Robert Cole. And I'm not going to define the topic, as we in times past did not define the topic. I'd like to think that we're only going to keep it at about an hour for sanity's sake, but given the fact that this is getting the band back together for this one and only time, it'll run as long as everyone wants to talk. And if I leave that open to Robert, we will be here for a week afterwards. Yes, Mr. Robert, I said that. But I'm going to make sure everybody knows that we're getting the band back together, at least for this one event. I'm hoping that as time goes on, not only will they individually or collectively get back together, but that I will open the door for others, people that you've missed as well, from Stephanie Smith to, the list goes on. We've had so many guest hosts over the years. You know, we're well into our 10th year right now, every week's show. So we have quite a list of previous guests and also future guests. So if you, being a follower of the show, and thank you for that, you feel like you would like to contribute to the show, we used to have where people could call in and jump on the show if they felt inclined to do that. I don't know if we're going to open it up that way quite yet immediately, but I would love to pre-organize if you want to join the show with a content or topic that you feel relevant that you would like to join. And we have an open discussion earlier to that to understand what you would want to talk about it. There is no self-selling in any of this. This isn't to come in and tell you about your product or what you offer. And we don't do that for those that know and watch us over the years. This is about topic and content that's relevant and helpful to everyone. It doesn't mean you can't talk about what you do. It doesn't mean you can't talk about what your company is good at, but not in a way that you're trying to pitch it, because obviously you're completely knowledgeable about your product and who you are and what your company is. I would much more have a conversation about why your company exists for doing what it's doing and why you came up with the service or the program or process that you did to do it, what you found the value of it is, than not. So it's very open for that. So next week, show number 440, the band is getting back together. I will be sending invites. I'm going to dust off all of my old email lists, even the ones that I send out emails to everyone that keeps relevant to this. And thank you for several thousand people get that email. I'm going to dust off some of the old lists as well and make a grand announcement about the band being back together next week. So again, I want to thank you for the privilege of your time. For those of you watching us on our TV channel, the Hospitality Channel, which is on Google TV, Apple TV, Amazon TV, Roku TV, Samsung, LG, all smart TVs have our channel. For our social recastings, which is on Facebook, multiple pages there, YouTube, multiple channels there, LinkedIn, one only, which is my profile. Thank you for watching me there. X, we're on there for live, and Twitch if you use your gaming console for media. Any of all which places, thank you so much. We're going to do a podcast today about data tools. Obviously, since we talked about data today for 2024, we're going to talk about some advanced AI integration data tools that are out there. So look forward to the audio podcast. That podcast goes into the marketing hour, which is actually a repetitive hour at different times of day for all the time zones that the radio station broadcasts globally on. So it'll be in there. Obviously, on our podcast, we're on 39 platforms around the world for that as well. We also translate it in 11 languages for people. So, and we appreciate it. We're re-simulcasting this shows. We always do 11:30 a.m. Sydney, Australian time for our APAC friends, and 11:30 a.m. Wednesday, London time for our EU and Mideast friends. So with that, my name is Loren Gray. Again, I thank you for the privilege of your time and look forward to talking to you all next week.